what I heard a lot today and what I know we all feel is the frustration that it's not just that we need more and better laws, but we just need enforcement of the laws that are already on the books. And I was trying to be very concrete, so I was going to say four things that I think would be great in terms of what we could do together now that we're in these positions. So the first I already alluded to, right, but that is, and Ellen has said this too, and many of you have already done this, is to give us very good specific leads where you know that labor law violations are taking place and where we ought to be out there investigating. And when I say good specific leads, right, what I think has worked so well in many of the cases that we've had a chance to work on together with many of you, it's being able to help us set up off-site interviews with the workers so that we can gather information from the workers, not on-site when they're under the eye of their employer, but ahead of time. And so then we can plan and we know what to expect when we get there. We know who the supervisor is going to be. We know what the language needs are. All that kind of pre-investigation work that has been so absent prior in the agencies, I think, really valuable in doing more in-depth and effective investigations, but it really requires good, solid leads. And we're trying to develop ways to do that internally through data analysis and the like, but I think the top way for that to happen is through collaborations with those of you who are in the room. Number two is to actually and I know this is asking a lot of folks who already are completely under-resourced yourself. So I say this again with thanks to those who have done it, is to actually come in and help do trainings of our staff. We've had a number of people also in this room come in and be a part of what I've called industry briefings at the DLSE. And what that means is that people with expertise in a certain industry, car wash, port truckers, agriculture, construction, what am I missing? Janitorial. Thank you, Red. They've come in and actually presented to staff statewide by video conference on the issues in that industry. What are the challenges in the industry? What's the structure of the industry? Who are the major players in the industry? What are the efforts going on to fight the exploitation and the labor law violations in the industry, and what then can we do to help? Those kinds of trainings. I was speaking, is Yana still here? About having folks come in to do training on how do you do employer research, right? What's the effective way to do employer research to find out everything you can about an employer when you've got an investigation going on, right? Beyond just the on-site investigation, which is obviously a very powerful tool, but one of the things I say a lot internally is because the DLSE has a statutory right to get on site, we've confused that right with an effective investigation, assuming that once you get there, you can be effective, which isn't always the case and isn't often the case. So trainings. The third thing is to really think about concrete collaborations based on the expertise that you have. I've given that a lot of thought because many of you are my brothers and sisters. I feel like I've talked to you, in my sleep. But some of these are, actual concrete, I think we need to get beyond the conversations that we all already agree on, right? We need to get beyond that we need change and we need to be more worker friendly and we need to have more linguistic access and all of that. We need to get to how to make that happen with the limited resources that we have and that you have. So an example of that is that our retaliation complaint investigations, again, have been, historically very, very poor. And so one of the initiatives that I've had is to actually work with law schools and get law students to help do investigations. And so when we was first starting this out, the internal question was, well, who on the outside is an expert on this and can help us? And I was like, I don't know, maybe Kevin Kish. And so Kevin Kish is now advising our process on how do we improve our investigations, and then having a process with law students to actually, he's going to teach a class, and we're going to be doing that at different law schools across the state to train young people on workers' rights, on anti-retaliation law, and to actually come and help conduct some of these investigations. And I think that it completely makes sense at a time of such austere budget to try to find outside resources that will also help to do some of what we care about, which is build an army outside the state who care about these issues and who understand them and can work on them. And then the last one is something I know I've asked many of you already before, which is to help hold the agency accountable. my slightly different take from Ellen on the thick skin thing is, I don't think anything that you would say about the agency would be harsher than what I think needs to happen inside the agency. So the accountability piece is so important because it's a large agency with some excellent staff, but some others who've been marching under, you know, different orders, and who I think it helps to have eyes and ears who are interacting with the agency tell me if the training we're doing, if the policies we're putting in place are actually being implemented. So I would ask that of you, and then ask for a direct communication about that when it's not happening. And I think that's related to the last thing, which I'll say about which is the funding piece, right? I know that you all would have to add that on to what you're already doing, and some of you have been doing it for many, many years without the specific funding to do it. But I feel like this is such a time where a project like that could change the entire face of the state. Because if we're getting that information in a systematic way, we can really make sure the changes we're trying to do from the top are actually happening throughout.
Great, excellent. So speaking of holding our policymaker friends accountable, we did want to open it up to all of you just to ask questions, to make comments, if you do have some accountability statements you want to share. So Kevin, we're going to start with you.
I have this sense looking back at some of the meetings that advocates have had, not of them thinking, crushed it, that we were awesome, and we convinced everyone in the agency. And, you know, looking back at thinking that there was almost certainly a different perception of us on the inside. And on the messaging thing, I'm wondering, what works? What resonates with people inside the agencies? Perhaps come to the table between us as crazy people, people who are on the fringes of the types of people that they
I think that it was a completely unfair setup from the moment we walked into the room. Because as we learned from the last speakers, right, all kinds of things that are in your mind cognitively about somebody before they come in, it completely informs what you hear. So no matter how rational what we were always saying seemed to us, it would never be viewed as rational by people who were already told that we were just out to get them. So I think that has been, you know, if not surprising, it's been very eye-opening for me. And I think that that's something that is hard to change. I mean, this is where I guess goes back to your first question about the benefits of being on the inside. I think that has to change from the inside out, right? And I say this again also internally all the time, to the response that, you know, well, we're not the union, we're not we're not a workers' right advocacy organization, Julie, we can't do those things. My point is, there is tremendous areas of common ground between those organizations and us. Right? Even if our final ultimate mission is not exactly the same, there's huge areas of common ground. So in those areas of common ground, we ought to be operating together, right? And that doesn't mean we get, right, you know, doesn't mean we send out deputies to, you know, to be organizers. It doesn't mean we send out I mean, maybe, but it doesn't mean we can do that. It doesn't mean we can do that. Really? Okay, but I think there's a mentality about how we do our jobs that either makes you hostile to the things that we all care about or not. And so I think, frankly, for me, that change comes from the inside. And I think we're starting to make a lot of headway there. And some of you who've worked with the agency, I think, are starting to see that. There are, again, really good people who are suddenly feeling like, oh, you know, the light has come on in my office and I'm allowed to do things that actually make sense, to talk to people who are actually perfectly reasonable, who actually want me to succeed. I think that is happening. And so to me, it's less something that I think we need to change, that you need to change, than that is a perspective change that we are working on. And at the same time, then I think, you know, coming back to these meetings, I mean, I will say the meetings that we've had, I think, have been really, really good in terms of, you know, what you guys come in with. And I don't need to say this, you all know this, but, you know, it's been tremendously well-researched, well-documented issues. And then I would say, I don't think that you should come in with anything less than, right, like, the most real criticism that you have, right? I don't think that certainly doesn't help me, and I don't think it's good for the agency. So I wouldn't tone those down. I think you were just, you know, it was a setup from the moment you walked in.
Ellen, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that I don't know about these meetings. We haven't met. We haven't really. You haven't met with us yet. So I hope you do. But we have been meeting with lots of folks. I mean, the size of the state, you know, it is, you know, kind of works against us, just being able to be everywhere, but we've been really trying to, you know, be, you know, kind of reach out north and south, you know, working with a consistent group of Southern California, all of the advocates here, you know, and being accountable, you know, kind of looking at agenda, seeing how we're moving things. I think the benefits, again, of hearing what isn't working, you know, and where the either attitude isn't good or the responsiveness has not been what people hope for, being able to really assess that and whether that's a resource thing we can deal with, whether it's a personnel issue we sure as hell should deal with. It's really important to know that, you know, and again, I think we've also been trying to do, you know, trainings, again, by, you know, kind of in industry groups, be it, you know, farm workers with CRLA and UFW, with the building trades, with different groups, again, to find out what our enforcement potential and limits are, what are the challenges, what can advocates teach us about it, you know, how can we make sure the advocacy is most effective, you know, understanding what, you know, where we can go and how to make that go farther. I think those things, when approached really in terms of a very common mission that we're trying really to get bad guys, we're trying to really find abuses and end them, you know, require, I do sense in many of my staff, you know, who I've inherited, you know, some old attitudes. And again, they did have different marching orders for a long time. And they're operating under resource limits, and they're trying to be very responsive, I think, you know, to complaints, and bending what our statutory requirements are of what a formal complaint is, you know, understanding the workforce of California, and not wanting to miss the opportunity to really move and advance workers' protection, with the advocates like you. So I think, you know, I think it's kind of those kind of opportunities to get together to understand the, you know, what's possible, where agencies like us can be moved farther and faster, you know, and figuring out how we could do that in a much more collaborative way, and also to find out where there's deep problems, because we've got our own.
Thanks, Ellen. Other questions? Yes.
I do worry a little bit about ensuring that people have cover that's harsh. That we want to continue that support, and we're not always the right people to do that, but if you have suggestions about how we can be in a broader way making effectiveness bolsters your supports you with.
Very good, important question. Thoughts about how we can support you and others, because again, we may not be the right people. Yeah.
Well, you know, I think I think getting in, you know, out in the media, you know, these campaigns helps us, kind of underlines the issues, makes the case that our agency should be there. You know, we're not just going after, you know, this employer, that employer, you know, we're bad for the business climate. You know, this notion of why government's important. I mean, I think, I know for OSHA, you know, that's a common challenge, that if we push, you know, everybody will, you know, the garment industry was, you know, the first, and of course, many of them did leave. And what we're left with is a lot of, you know, bottom feeder, you know, companies whom we continue to have to, but I think getting out, you know, the very case about the abuses, about, you know, the lack of protection, helps us. So I think that gives cover. Obviously, having folks out there saying, do more, makes us seem, you know,
Enough.
like we're not
Yeah.
doing enough, yes, so that's helpful.